Hello, everybody. Welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury.
And I'm Nick Amaral.
And welcome to Ask the Tech Coach, episode 20. Today, we're going to be talking all about Tech Coach websites and discussing how you guys can create the perfect website for your professional development portal. Nick, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Jeff. Just been working with an iPad initiative, trying to get some of our teachers mobile in the classroom recently. So that's our newest goal right now. So designing some PD and running some workshops on that.
You know, I love that. Getting teachers mobile, realizing that the classroom has no walls, getting teachers to teach, maybe not from the front of the classroom, but from the back of the classroom. And it is so important when we do that to make sure that the teacher knows that it's okay to try new things. And really that kind of ties into what we were talking about last week on our episode about reflections. What kind of feedback did you get last week, Nick, about our episode 19, creating a one-to-one relationship with your teachers?
I think that a lot of people liked it. The idea of kind of being open and honest, with teachers and with them as far as what works and what doesn't. They like the idea of, I think we talked about a few times, just taking it slow, building relationships, and how that foundation, the relationship foundation with staff, it plays a vital role into how the rest of the year and the PD and the workshops is going to go.
I agree. Before we always get into business with teachers, it's always, hey, how you doing? How's school? How's the family? What's going on? It is so important to create those one-to-one relationships. And you know, Nick, because the show is called Ask the Tech Coach, we had quite a few tech coaches this week write into us. Let's kind of throw a couple questions up here. I think the most important one, and the one that I struggle the most with, is it possible to make everyone happy?
No, and this is a tough one, right? Because I think we try to do that, right? I think that's just something that we innately are trying to do. That's our role, right? Work with so many teachers. We want to make them happy, but it just doesn't happen. And, I've been in there. I've run workshops where, some people, are just not into the topic or whatever it is, or they just are trying to knock out hours. So, it's just we try to hit the majority. And I think that's the best that we can do. And you're not going to win every single battle, but as long as you can get some people excited and interested to come back, then that's a win. And what are your thoughts, Jeff?
And I think it all depends on where you are, right? Like we've said this many times. I've got 6 buildings, you've got 2 buildings. If you're not a native in that building, and then you walk in once a semester, once a month, and you do that PD session, or you're working with, really, they're your teachers, but they're strangers to you, right? You don't know what happens when you leave, right? They might go to the principal and talk about you or say something, and you're like, my goodness, I thought that actually went really well. You don't know that they were at a higher level or a lower level, or somebody was intimidated until maybe you get that phone call and you're like, yeah, you got to change a couple things. Has that ever happened to you, Nick, where somebody might have been not too enthused with what you were doing and suddenly you were the jerk of the world?
Yeah, I think it's when the information that they've received, right, isn't completely accurate or true to maybe what has happened. And I think that happens sometimes where, I tried to contact Nick and he never responded to my phone call. But what's the backstory to that? Is Nick busy, running around from classroom to classroom, or is he busy running a workshop, or his afternoons booked that maybe I just couldn't book something that day, Did the teacher reach out to me last minute? How many times, does that happen for a tech coach where you're like, oh man, as much as I'd love to do it, I just last minute, I'm already booked. So, I think it's just that. It's just a matter of the information and how it was perceived.
And then we had another question here, which kind of ties in, which I love how, we're getting multiple questions from different angles, but they all kind of with that same, how do I do the gig, right? And so the last question here is, how do we recover if something happens we might not be aware of? Maybe I'm working with you one-to-one and I don't realize I hit a button, or I don't realize that maybe I went too fast, and you're not comfortable telling me, whoa, let's back up a little bit. Or again, maybe you walk into a faculty meeting and you go, what's the right term here, Nick? You go all ed camp on them, and you're not picking up the vibe that they're stone-faced and they're not following you until you leave, and then you realize, oh, we just spent 45 minutes and I was so on the wrong planet.
Yeah. You know what? One other thing I think that I've liked to take advantage of is sort of kind of going back to just the classroom application, that teachable moment. And I think that's a pretty important thing to kind of just keep an eye out for. You have to kind of have that innately where you can just pick up on it. And like you said, if I'm running and we had a goal, and our goal was to walk out designing a digital playlist using Google Sites, right? But then I get in and the teacher doesn't have any background comfort in Google Sites or in digital playlists. Maybe then we take a step back, and I have to do that as a coach. I have to think, okay, let's get back to the basics for a second. Why don't we actually spend this time getting comfortable with Google Sites, or why don't we learn the pedagogy behind digital playlists? And then maybe that could open the door for next time. What about you? What are your thoughts about that?
And that's hard. Like, I've had that situation where you're adjusting on the fly.
Sure.
And maybe you put on the brakes a little bit and you go from 50 miles an hour to like 15. But then afterwards, maybe you get that conversation and they go, yeah, but you didn't complete the objective I wanted you to complete. The reason I brought you here for this meeting,
sure,
you didn't go. And I've been in situations, you're sitting there going, well, wait a minute. I went at the speed of the clientele in front of me. I couldn't get that much farther because they wanted to know how to insert an image. I was trying to get them to the next level, but they were all like, dude, hold on. Right. Yep. And it's hard. It really, really is hard. And the reason why we're bringing up these kinds of topics is because maybe you're out there shaking your head going, yep, I've been in that spot. Maybe you're out there going, if only there was a place for me to learn how to do this better. And you know what, Nick, here we are. It's October the 8th, and we're only 2 days away from launching our Tech Coach Mastermind. We've had such a great response. We are almost at, what are we at here? Almost, 8 or 9 or so tech coaches that have signed up for this thing.
Yep.
We are so excited to work with all of our tech coaches out there. If you have signed up and you're listening to this, the emails went out. You guys all have access to the website. You can check out the free lesson plans. The LMS course is going to be coming up soon. There's a lot of great stuff that's happening. But Nick, if we want to find out how to learn more information about that mastermind, it's still not too late to sign up. What's the website that we have to go to sign up today?
So they can reach us at teachercast.net/AskTheTechCoachMastermind.
And look, we've been getting a lot of great feedback about that. And I promise you guys, this is the last show that we're going to mention it. But really, Nick, what are we going to get here? We're doing an 8-week mastermind. And a mastermind is really a professional learning community. But we're putting together a select group of tech coaches. We're going to do 2 face-to-face meetings each month. We're going to be offering digital literacy conversations. We're going to help you guys create a tech integration plan for your school district. We're going to give you a 5-week online course on learning management systems. It's to die for. It's awesome. But also, we're going to be doing bonus podcasts. After each show, or I should say after each meeting, I guess, when we get together, Nick and I are going to be taking all the ideas and putting our heads together and doing bonus podcasts for the group and creating bonus blog posts all around the topics that are meaningful for the group. And, we've been putting up here, we've got probably, 8 or 9, maybe a half dozen or so digital lesson plans. And we're going to be adding more digital lesson plans, digital cheat sheets, things that you can take back to your students and teachers and use right away. And the thing I'm excited about, Nick, even sitting here, the people who are already in the mastermind have already started signing up for our exclusive membership in our Tech Coach Facebook group. I'm looking forward to this. teachercast.net/AskTheTechCoachMastermind. Check it out. It is still time to do it. Basically, you can do it up until the night of October the 9th. So if you're hearing this on Monday or Tuesday, go to teachercast.net/AskTheTechCoachMastermind. We would love to have you. And if you use the promo code TC50, we'll give you $50 off your registration. So check that out today at teachercast.net/AskTheTechCoachMastermind. Now, Nick, it is time for our tip of the week. What is our tip of the week today?
So since we're kind of focusing and talking about websites, one of the things I've just learned from designing websites is to make them organic. So my tip really just speaks volumes to the idea of integrating your school and your district into it, and that the more organic, the more it's built around the customs and the ideals of your school and your district, it just becomes a place that teachers like to kind of go to more often.
And this is a topic, Nick, that we started, I think it was back in episode 11 or 12 or something like that.
A few times, yeah.
And we got a lot of feedback from this. They asked the tech coach, right? And so that's why we wanted to do an entire episode on this. Nick, I want to give you a little tech coach website quiz. Are you up for a challenge right now?
All right, let's do it. Yep.
When you build your website, who is that website for?
So for me, I'm designing it for a bunch of people. I think it's got to be accessible to the teachers themselves. But then you have different groups of teachers, right? You have the advanced or basic level. So I have to be able to hit to both segments, sections of the teachers. I also want my admin to be able to look at it and see that that's connecting to district goals or building initiatives and things like that. So there's a variety of clientele. I even work and do PD with, secretaries and administrative assistants. So that's another piece that I try to integrate in there. With my website design or learning management system and things like that I integrate.
And that is the right answer, right? It's about everybody.
Everyone, yeah.
Right? Some people say that like my tech coach website is for me. My staff portal is for my staff. And I have an internal website that just I have access to and that I use. It's got my dashboards. It's got a whole bunch of charts. It's my table of contents into my Google Drive. But we also have our external tech coach website, which, as Nick said, has our PD on it. It has our standards. It has links to everything that we need. It has all of these different things in here. And really today, it just comes down to, why are we doing this? Why do we put our hearts into making this? And really the next question here is, how do we use it? I know for myself, Nick, I use my staff website, our staff portal, as a model. Right? When I do my PD, all of the PD sessions are on the staff portal, and I teach exactly the way that I'm hoping to see our teachers teach when we go and visit them in the classrooms. I set up my stuff in a playlist. I put all the stuff in there. So that way, as I'm teaching, sometimes I step aside and say to the teachers, okay, I'm going to break the fourth wall for a second. Let's take a look at how I design this. And then we step back into the lesson. So that way they're not only seeing it from a teacher's point of view, but they're seeing it from a student and teacher point of view, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. One of the things that sounds just like for me is, when you're putting it together, is using it as an opportunity to teach and model some of the things that you want them to work on. We have a big thing right now that we've been discussing, especially my curriculum director and I, as far as, how is what we're doing changing how the teaching is happening in the classroom? We can talk about blended learning and flipped, but if we're still kind of teaching in the same kind of rote way of learning that they think students are going about in the classroom, then we got to change the game. So how are we really changing it? So I love that. When I have my PD using my learning management system, I gamified it. Well, gamifying it really has sparked on so much discussion, because teachers come to me, how did you set up these self-paced modules? How do you open up these different paths? All of that is just modeling gamification and the things they can do. And now it's a talking and a sticking point, and something we can work on in the future.
So who has access to your website? Here's the question, right? Is this something... Let me go backwards for a second. Your PD site, your tech coach site, is that just the Nick site, or is that part of a district level website portal?
So mine's a little tricky, because we're heavily involved with the learning management system. I run pretty much everything through that. So, through my learning management site, I have links to where teachers can click on something that says book me here. They can click on an image of, my learning plan to be able to track their hours. So I wanted everything to be integrated. However, I do utilize WordPress for a site, because I like to have my tech tips and blog posts and teacher created training videos and whatever, because I try to make it as organic as possible. I want them to include things and share it out with other teachers and the district. So that I do run through WordPress, which they can get through my learning management system. Again, I want it to all kind of be in one spot. But I am the only person who posts content. So I'm the person putting it up, or, sharing the link or whatever. They just share me the things they want me to put up there.
So I asked this question, Nick, because for many tech coaches, they have their dedicated site. And for many tech coaches, they are part of the district site, which means there's other opportunities for cooks in the kitchen. Right. And every situation's a little bit different here. And obviously, if you're building your tech coach site, you can kind of design it however you need to. Whereas if you're designing it with a district in mind, you got to think districty. You can't necessarily be cutesy. For lack of a term here, you have to be more professional looking, where, I've seen a lot of fantastic tech coaches, but they're all more lovey-dovey tech rather than this is the staff portal.
Sure.
Right? So a lot of here is, we talk about who the website is for, right? We talk and say that it's for coaches, right? So when I say a website is for coaches, I'm looking at, I use this website for myself. When I sit down with my teacher and we go over their lesson plan, and they might say, like, where do you have other examples? Personally, I have a site. I have a page on the site that has examples from other teachers. So I go to the archives page and I can just pick and choose like I'm, grocery shopping. As opposed to, maybe if I was to go pick and hunt through my Google Drive, I'd be spending 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 minutes per teacher just hunting for stuff. So I use my website as a coach to be able to find things quickly for teachers, find examples, find templates, find everything. Do you use your site, Nick, as your own public grab bag, or do you just think of it as it's the teacher site that I'm the admin for?
No, I use it for myself as well. There are a lot of times where, I get an email in from a teacher about how to do something. And I use it as a go back to, like, oh man, I remember, posting a tech tip, or I remember having some spot where I have a how-to guide on how to do something. And then I go to it and I have it and I find it, and then I share it back out with the teacher, or I need it to kind of spark and jog my memory about something maybe we had a discussion about. So absolutely, I use it as a grab bag of tricks kind of to go back to pull, oh, here's a tech tip, or here's a tool we talked about, and here's some different things. So, you touched on the idea, which really kind of stems the whole, I think, opening of the website, which is know your audience.
Yes.
Right. Like you talk to students about writing, an essay or a speech, and they got to know who they're gearing it toward. If you're gearing this toward parents and you're designing, like, this is a question I have for you. Do you include parents? Because that's something that's come up down our line is, Nick, should you include parents or a place for parents to learn through your tech coach? And I almost kind of feel that that's a separate piece.
Yes.
Right. So you feel the same way with that?
I believe that you need to have a family site. This is the safe spot where you're going to put your school things. If we want to make a parent portal, and I highly suggest having a place where parents learn how to do things, right?
Right. Yep.
And what is that web? That's how to use your learning management system. That's how to log in for the parent access. That's the how to do things. That's not your teacher facing PD sites, staff sites, the place where all the links are to get to all your district-wide important things, right? When I'm looking at using a site for a coach, I have spots on my website that are private, meaning only I can use them. And I have spots on the site that are public, meaning only I want my teachers to use them. And I use, we use Google Sites, and you can hide pages from navigation, but I still have pages in there that I can access because maybe they have, resources or things that I need. So I bookmark those hidden pages. I know where they are. I can get to them, but the staff doesn't necessarily need to know that there's all these things hidden in there. And I think it's an interesting idea that even teachers can use on their own teacher pages or on their own lesson portals.
Sure.
One of the things that I always teach is, like when I make up my PD page for a specific class, I will somewhere at the bottom have a row on a Google site that says teacher resources, and I'll put a link. Here's my presentation editing link. Here's my Google Sites editing link. Now, these are things that if the students, or I should say my teachers, click on them, they get the error message that says, page doesn't exist, you don't have and that's okay. I put that stuff there so I can quickly access it when I'm working on that or when I'm updating something. So there's a lot of different reasons why you would want to make your coaching site for you and your students. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at making it for our district, though, Nick, that's a completely different conversation, right? As a district level, Now you're just a part of the district's plan.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to, what we kind of just started with, and that was my question is, if we're going to, knowing your audience, if you're going to make it for parents, does the parent piece need to be tied in? If it's going to be at an administrative level, now we're going to talk about maybe big, umbrella ideas and where maybe things we're doing fits under. Is that data needed? Are those analytics, or those things needed where the teachers need to be able to access them? I think too much is going to clutter it up. So, gear it toward the specific audience that you want. We can kind of link coaches in maybe with teachers, but like you said, the idea and the trick of hiding certain pages is great. And that's even great for the teacher. If you want to keep your project, maybe the teacher's using Google Sites for a project. And then they have these hidden pages where it's the analytics and the student data side. They can keep it all lumped into one area. That way it's easily accessible. But then I just want to see the results. And then they can go to that hidden tab and see the feedback of the information. So it's a great trick. But district sites, I think that's a whole nother game. Absolutely.
And we want to know what you guys are up to, right? Like, as we're going through here and we're talking about these things, maybe you guys have some comments. We can mention them, of course, next week on our show on episode 21 that's happening next week. But we want to know, reach out to us on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach. Or, of course, you can always leave us a voicemail over at teachercast.net/voicemail. Or, of course, email us over at feedback@teachercast.net. Now, Nick, we know why we have a website. We know what the purpose is. We know who we're creating it for. What goes in a website? What's one thing that you need to have as a tech coach on your website?
All right, so my number one has to be the appointment calendar. I need, it's that back and forth of email. I don't want to kind of get caught up in that, so I want to make it simple. I want them to just have an accessible calendar. Book me when you need me. The reminder gets sent to me, and then I'm able to just, see it on my phone the morning of and jump in the rooms when I need to be there.
Now, that also brings up something that I think, Nick, we need to do a whole show on this, training your staff members, right? Because most staff members will email you for things.
Sure.
And that's, of course, an acceptable way, but you don't want to respond to an email and say, hey, Nick, thanks for emailing me, but could you go fill out this thing over here?
Right. And that's so funny, Jeff, just because so many people do that. And then the idea of you want to say, you want them to, ultimately, you're like, man, I wish they would just use the appointment calendar. But that couldn't be more than one of the worst things to do, is to then send them that email that says, hey, click this link and book it this way anyway. It's like, now you just took extra time to spend when you could have just docked it in your own calendar or just remembered it, sort of deal. But, I totally get how that can get lost in email. And we're trying to kind of get rid of that niche of losing work that way.
Right. You're just happy that they care enough to find you, right?
Right. Exactly.
They deem your service as useful somehow.
Right.
Appointment calendar. You had mentioned a few. I use Google Forms, so that way I can then, at least track it. I can then go back and forth with email. I've tried a few of the other, well, first of all, what do you use?
Yeah, so I like Google Calendar, using the appointment slots, but I've used, you can book me. I know we've talked about Appointly before, and all good. My one thing with any of them has been just the idea of, and I'm not using a premium version. So obviously, if I did that, that would be a whole nother benefit. My thing is just custom time slots and not being able to monitor, haul time and things like that.
And my big thing for not doing that is the fact that when you're running between all the buildings, and I don't have a day where Tuesday I'm at the middle school, Wednesday I'm at the elementary school.
Right.
I could be many places on the same exact day. I don't want somebody trying to book a time with me and they don't realize that 15 minutes earlier I'm in a different time zone. And you don't know where those things are because you're just looking at a calendar that says free or busy. And I find that again, going back to last week, Nick, creating those great opportunities for one-to-one. You never want to have somebody finally book you and then you write back and go, I'm not even in that building that day. Can you not do that? Or you go back and say, hey, thanks for the email, but could you do it over here also? That doesn't start the good relationship. So I agree with you. Appointment calendars are important. I think the big thing that we put on our tech coaches to coach websites is, apps and web tools, right?
Sure.
Some people have a HyperDoc. that they can put everything in. Some people have reviews. Some people just make a Google site page that links out to many things. Some people do. I've seen all the different variations. Nick, what do you do?
Yeah, so for apps, I like integrating like Padlet or something like that into my sites. I find that to just be a fun thing. It's different. It's interactive. I like that to highlight classroom achievements. So I'm all about the spreading the fire idea. And if one teacher does it and highlights what they're doing and it worked or it was effective, the next teacher follows it. So I like Padlet as that sticky board. So I have one on my site that I use, or it's accessible through our LMS or the site. I have it in both places. So just a fun spot for them to go to and utilize that, and the tech tips and the crib sheets and the tip sheets, stuff like that, which are basically hyperdocs in essence, Google Docs that are just embedded into the site. What about you? You have a go-to app?
I've been a big fan of S'more.
Okay.
Because with the S'more, and S'more, by the way, again, is how we're doing our lesson plans and our crib sheets and stuff like that for our mastermind website. And if you are a part of the mastermind, you'll get all of that stuff built into your membership. I like having a site done by, how do I put it? So the site that I'm building right now says, I want my students to be able to, as opposed to having a page with 1,000 apps. Because if you give a teacher that's intimidated by technology, or even somebody who's a level 2 certified, right, as long as you're doing that and you give them a page full of 15 apps, they're going to click on a link, look at a homepage and go, I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I have mine set up to say, I want my students to be, I want them to be artists, recorders, geographers, whatever the verb is there, right? I want them to be doing this. Then a teacher can at least say, oh, I want to do something with audio. Here's the list of apps. I want my kids to be doing something with websites. Here's the list of apps. And at least it's a starting point. Now, yes, you're going to have an app in more than one category. I get it. But it's a start. Right? It's a way to get somebody interested, because maybe they're looking for lesson plan ideas and they just see the questions, I want my kids to be map makers. Okay, now what do you got? You got Google Maps, you got My Maps, you got Google Earth, you got Google Slides, and someone might go, wait, slides? I can do mapping with slides? Now that's the introduction for the conversation. That's what gets you that phone call or that email or anything like that. So definitely have something for web tools. And, we had mentioned S'more. We've been doing all of our lesson plans here on Ask the Tech Coach using S'mores. So we have all of our S'mores designed for our lessons. And I like doing this on S'mores because I can then send my teachers a single S'more. And just like I'd be sitting there, here's what you need. Here's the idea for a lesson. Here's some examples. Here's a template you can download. And it literally runs everything through.
And I think that's an important piece, Jeff. I think for anyone, even if you're a teacher and you're trying to get into this, or just you're a tech coach and you're looking for some ideas, I think that piece, having a lesson that teachers can take away, because that's the most important piece, right? They're looking for that, like, all right, how do I use this tool, but how can I apply it to the classroom? I do a similar thing at the bottom of a lot of different, documents or whatnot. I have just a section, and all it says is, so what if? And the idea is it's just going to be followed by quick little snippets that really are lessons or activities of how to use that tool. So we're talking about Flipgrid. So what if, you generated a digital scavenger hunt, or we're talking about, S'more, like you said. So what if students were designing a social media campaign and S'more was one of the elements? Right. So I think that's a powerful piece.
So we have our appointment calendar. We have apps and web tools. We have lesson plans.
Yep.
I know on mine, I always have a calendar of our PD classes, but I also have the actual websites that I build my PD sites on. Nick, do you just go in with a slide deck? Do you put everything on a website? I know you're going to tell me you probably use a learning management system for this, right?
I do use my learning management system for everything. So I do have, my learning modules and things like that for teachers to jump into.
The last thing that we put on our website is tips, tricks, resources. Yeah. And this could be anything from embedding our Tech Tip Tuesdays or whatever you call it out there, to just having those those resources available. Today somebody came up and said, hey, I just got an interactive TV in my classroom. How do I use it? And I went, ta-da! And I pulled out this entire Google site that I made on this, and they look at me like, you're crazy. You've done this for us? I go, yeah, that's the gig. You're ready before you're supposed to be ready, right? So there's a lot of different things on here. We want to know what's on your Tech Coach website. You can, of course, go over to Twitter and find us at Ask the Tech Coach, or reach out to us and let us know. Teachercast.net/voicemail. We would love to hear from you. And if you leave us a voicemail, maybe we'll play it on the show next week. We would love to get some feedback about our show. And, tell us what you think. Tell us what you're doing out there. Now, Nick, we know a little bit about why. We know a little bit about what. Now we're going to learn a little bit about where. Options for websites, right? We talked a little bit earlier about WordPress. I like WordPress.
I like WordPress, yeah.
WordPress is awesome. There's various ways of looking at WordPress, right? You could do WordPress.com, which you can get a free blog on WordPress.com and set it up, and that's pretty cool. You could also go self-hosted. I know many schools have a self-hosted WordPress account that they create things. If that's your school, maybe you can offload a subdomain. You could do techcoach@myschool.com. And so you could do a self-hosted way. One of my favorite ways to work with teachers is EduBlogs. And just like WordPress.com, it's a free site. It's full WordPress. You can do students and teachers. You can do classrooms in there if you wanted to set it up with multiple people. There's a lot of different things that you can do in the world of WordPress. Give it a try. The biggest thing about WordPress, I would say, Nick, is WordPress is a blog that happens to have a website component to it, as opposed to other sites like Squarespace, Wix, Weebly that are websites that happen to have a blog attached to it. It really all depends on how you want to organize your content.
Sure. Okay.
Now, the next thing that we're looking at is the one probably many people are out there are using, which is Google Sites.
Google Sites, yep.
I love Google Sites. I probably build 5 or 6 new Google Sites a day with my teachers. Simple, free, right? Connects right into your Google account. You can lock it down so it's in domain only, right? Like today I had the question, if I put something on a Google site, can the world see it? Well, maybe, but you could have an open Google site but lock down a Google Doc. That's a possibility, right? So you can always play with the controls over that stuff. Another way that I've seen a lot of my MIE friends do it is they're using OneNote. And
so this is a new one to me, Jeff. So you're going to have to explain OneNote a little bit.
OneNote is wonderful. And there's a lot of links in our show notes over at Ask the Tech Coach episode 20 about OneNote. As you guys know, I'm a Microsoft Innovative Educator. I'm the host of the Microsoft Innovative Educator podcast. And we do a lot of stuff with OneNote. OneNote is essentially oh my goodness, they might hurt me for saying it this way, but it's a notebook, right? They call them class notebooks and stuff like that. But basically, you take a blank sheet of paper and you can put things anywhere on that paper you want, right? So it doesn't have to, it can be organized however you want. You can create a text box, throw it anywhere on there. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, but literally on one OneNote page, you can organize it by pages, by chapters, by tabs, by multiple things. If you were in a Microsoft Office 365 district, this might be a good solution for you. If you're in a Google School district, maybe Google Sites is good for you. It really depends on how you're teaching your teachers how to teach. Right, and I think that's the deal. Obviously, I put all my stuff on Google Sites because I'm modeling that for my kids. My Tech Coach friends that are in O365 schools do everything in OneNote because they're trying to teach a teacher and model how to build and organize their digital self. Nick, you might have another way of creating things. I'm sure you're going to tell me that the learning management system is able to have all of the things that you need right in front of you.
Absolutely. Now, granted, I love Google Sites. I like it for its simplicity. I like the streamlined, feed down the center and being able to, move things and modify the page to your liking. And WordPress I use for a blog and tech tips. But absolutely, the learning management system, again, I think it comes back to what you just said. Just feeling out your staff. What's the tool? What's the place that they spend a lot of time? For us, we spend a lot of time in the learning management system. So I utilize that as the site. I have access to tech tips, and I'll be honest, I'm actually working on integrating and utilizing the portfolio that's built into our learning management system to now actually become the new place where I'm going to hold our tech tips. So maybe, eventually I may actually kind of not need my WordPress tech tip site really anymore. And that's all going to be merged in as well. And again, the goal is really simple. It's just, I don't want my teachers clicking everywhere. I want to make it as easy as one-stop shop. It's a hub. Everything you need is right there.
So if you're out there listening to this, please do me a favor. Raise your hand if you've ever thought this. Oh my goodness, I spent 5 hours doing this and nobody has looked at it yet.
That's me.
Right? And that's kind of the idea behind this, right? It's, if we're going to spend the time making it, if we're going to say we're building it to use it as a model, if we're going to pour our hearts into building this site to be useful for people, clearly, Nick, we want it to be useful to people. So one of my tech tips for making websites is having a clear focus to the content. Do I want this to be a apps resources site that happens to have lessons? Or do I want to make this a lesson site where people know to come here to learn awesome stuff? And then, oh, by the way, we're using Flipgrid, or oh, by the way, we're using Padlet. Or is this my PD portal that while I'm teaching, I also have a how-to guide on how to use Google Sites, or slides, or docs, or whatever you have there. But I would say the most important thing for anybody, and this is tech coach site, this is personal branding site, this is anything that you're doing, right? Have a clear focus to their content.
And that's a good one. I think for me, Jeff, just having the clean navigation, the idea that everyone can just kind of search your site. They know where things are. They don't have to spend too much time searching for stuff. They find what they want, at that minute. Think about how many teachers just, hey, I'm on a prep or I'm on my lunch. I want to see how to do something. I got 5 minutes I can spend. I just want to learn this trick. Boom, they get it, and then they move on.
And that's important. And the only way that you know that, it's kind of by failing. Right?
Sure.
Like I can't tell you how many different variations of tech coach sites I've built in the last 4 years here, but you always get into that, I want to build this. And I've talked to many tech coaches since we started up the podcast here over the summertime that said, I'm a new tech coach. I want to build a rocket ship, and then we're going to get into September. And I'm going, dude, that might be awesome, but you're spending a lot of time building something that you don't have proof of. You might spend a lot of time building something and get to school and your teachers are like, I don't want to learn that way. I want this. And
sure.
Now what you've done with your time, you've got all this great stuff. You're ready to go. But again, you built it the way you wanted it to be built, not the way your students or your teachers want to be built. So keeping that navigation, find a couple good friends, check it out. We've said it in the past. Nick and I are constantly bouncing things back and forth. We're in 2 different districts. And what do you think? Does this work? How does, what are we doing things? Always have that somebody out there, even on the teaching staff, that you can kind of feel the vibe of here, because not only do you need to have that clear focus, not only do you need to have that clean navigation, but it's got to be able to search for things, right? Like you got to be able to go there and find what you don't know.
Right. And use that as an opportunity, right? So, those are those teachable moment things. And you as the person putting it together, have a feel for, this is built off the relationships, right? Get to know your teachers, find the things they need, and use that as the places that of the content that you want to fill your site with.
So, Nick, there's a lot of stuff that we just covered here. We talked about why creating a website, what goes in a website, how to build the platform. And certainly, I love the tips here of making sure that everybody is focused on that one thing. Really, the only thing that we didn't talk about yet is promoting the website. Like, how do you right. promote the website? Nick, how do you promote where all of your stuff is? Do you just say, go to my staff portal? Or do you say, hey, this page has this page has that?
So, when I post tech tips, one of the things is I always like to shoot that out in an email. I don't send too many emails. When I do, I try to just do like a tech tip. But one of my tricks is I don't tell what the tech tip is in my email. I say, new tech tip of the week, whatever it is. And then I'll say, you know what, this tech tip covers this idea. And you could see it now here. And all it is the link that then brings them right to the tech tip site. Then it's like, oh, they click on it. It brings them there right to that new tip. And now that they're there, maybe I've caught them. Maybe like, well, you know what? I've got a few minutes to kill. So let me start to poke around and see what other things he's got on here. So that's just a little trick that I've used, and it works really well.
I completely echo what you just said there. You know, make sure that you have the stuff available. Hopefully they poke and find things. If that means organizing a sidebar or a footer or, you know, adding a few extra links. I know Google Sites doesn't do related content the same way WordPress does, but that doesn't mean that you can't find a way to build things into your navigation system. You know what, guys? I think the thing that we've learned over the last couple of years here as being tech coaches is it's never easy. And there's certainly many ways that you can go north and south with it, but it's a process, right? Your website is never done. TeacherCast is never going to be finished, right? This podcast is never, sorry, Nick, it's never going to be finished. Like, you're always going to be trying to look at it and improve upon it. And so, any last words of advice before we move on from this tech coach website topic?
No, I think it's good that we kind of broke this down, because we've talked about, you know, sites in the past before, but we never kind of broke it down. And I think just one of the big takeaways for me is harping on the idea of the organic site and building it based off of what your specific needs are. We have that tendency to want to run with the site design and get all creative and spice it up and add a lot of things. But again, what's the direct initiative and needs of your teachers, and focus on those things.
Guys, we want to know what you guys are out there doing. You can always find us on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach. Leave us a voice message over at teachercast.net/voicemail. And please keep all these questions coming in. We love hearing from you. We had emails this week, Nick, from Denmark, from Poland, from Brazil, from New Jersey. We had a lot of stuff out in Texas. Thank you guys for reaching out to us over here at Ask the Tech Coach. This is the podcast to help you guys become better tech coaches and create amazing professional development for your students. Nick, what do we have going on next week? Episode 21.
So in the next episode, we are going to look at best training methods to use as tech coaches. So, you know, should we design online learning modules? Is face-to-face better? Whole group versus one-to-one training, department versus whole building, tech tips versus weekly newsletter. So I think that's an awesome one. We do all of that stuff.
And this really is the continuation of this lesson.
Sure.
Right? Which is really the continuation of episode 19's lessons. Now that you have your website, what are you going to do with it? Right? We've talked about it a lot on this show. It is a training portal. No matter what you have on it, it is what we're going to use as the backbone for our professional training sessions. And next week, we're really going to be diving into the best ways. We want to know from you guys, right? Again, are you guys more face-to-face? Are you building online learning? Do you use badging? How are you doing that? That's what we're going to be talking about next week. If you have any questions that you'd like us to bring up or have on our show, please let us know over on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach. Nick, we've got a lot of great things as we go through here, as October is just hitting. Of course, we've got the Mastermind, which people can still sign up for over at teachercast.net/AskTheTechCoach Mastermind. We got a lot of great topics coming up in November and December, and as we go through the rest of the year. It's been a good month of September. I know I've had a good start to my school year. Nick, did you have a good start to your school year?
I did. You know, one of my goals this year was just to spend more time bouncing into classrooms, you know, just randomly, just meeting teachers, like building relationships, like we said on the last episode, and just popping in more often. And I've had a fun time doing it.
Me too. I've made it a point to get in touch with those teachers who I might not have had those personal relationships over the last couple of years. And I'm trying to bring in at least 2 or 3 new friends every single week as we go. And I got to tell you, this podcast, just being a part of it with you, has certainly helped me out. I know I've gotten that same feedback from other teachers and tech coaches around the country. So thank you guys out there for listening to the show. And as we always say, thank you for making Ask the Tech Coach and the TeacherCast Network part of your professional development. Nick, where do we find out more information about the stuff you're doing?
So you can find me on Twitter at @AnAdmiralEDU, or on my blog, edtechforay.wordpress.com.
And of course, you can find out all the information here over at AskTheTechCoach.com. This is episode 20. We have all of our archived blogs and podcasts and online courses and everything over there on AskTheTechCoach.com. And check out some of the other stuff happening over on TeacherCast. We've got a lot of great things on how to make a podcast We'll be bringing that up in an upcoming episode. How to make a great website. We got a lot of stuff there. And, of course, this week on our newsletter, we really touted the work of our friend Dr. Sam Patterson, all the stuff he's doing in the field of STEM education, makerspaces. Check out his website, mypaperlessclassroom.com. And, of course, again, we want to say thank you guys for out there for making TeacherCast the home for your professional development. And until next time, my name is Jeff Bradbury.
And I'm Nick Amaral.
Reminding you to keep up the great work in your classroom and continue sharing your passions with your students.